Tribal Greymon. With EX1, a lot is added to this build that makes it a very fun and aggressive deck. For this deck, after throwing it together and playtesting it, it felt very similar to an Agumon deck that doesn't go into Agumon Bond of Bravery, and Jesmon for the occasional bricking. As always, I'll go over the card by card, the strengths, the weaknesses, and the combos. This deck runs 5 level 2s, 14 level 3s, 12 level 4s, 8 level 5s, 5 level 6s, 3 level 7s, 3 option cards, and 5 Tamers. For level 2s, this deck runs 4 Koromon and 1 Demimeramon. Koromon is the MVP rookie for Tribal Greymon decks, because red has very little ways of searching off the top or adding cards. Sure, you may run red memory boost, but for the purpose of this deck, we're going for Vroom Vroom Death. With Koromon, you can aggressively security check while also adding cards to your hand. And with Demimeramon, it's a simple plus 1000 DP extra to go into the security as well. There aren't any substitutes I'd recommend other than Bebidomon, because this deck does get into piercing. For level 3s, this deck runs 14 level 3s in the form of 4 BT5 Agumon, 4 P009 Agumon, 2 Starter Deck 1 Agumon, and 4 Starter Deck 7 Agumon. Very simplistic. BT5 Agumon provides some digging off the top for Greymon type Digimon and Omnimon. A single play can potentially net you 2 cards with your low level 6 count, and this is how you find them. As for the rest of the Agumons, they're there to provide DP buffs for your Digimon. P009 Agumon for the generic plus 2000 DP for your Digimon, if it's a Greymon named Digimon that can swing into either your opponent's Digimon or the security and still retain the DP increase. Starter Deck 1 for the same reason, but slightly less, and 4 Starter Deck 7 for the big 2000 only going into the security. For other Agumons, you may run the 2-cost Agumon from BT3, or outright swap the ratios around for Starter Deck 1 Agumon over Starter Deck 7 Agumon for more variability to swing into your opponent's Digimon. Other changes I consider were swapping one level 4 for another Starter Deck 1 Agumon, but more playtesting needs to be done. For level 4s, this deck runs 4 BT5 Greymon, 4 Starter Deck 1 Greymon, and 4 Starter Deck 7 Geo Greymon. BT5 Greymon can be a cheap body to evo into when going on top of your Agumons, or even a 0 cost if Nokia Shiromine is out on the board. While Starter Deck Greymon gives you that +1 security check for extra goodness. Geo Greymon on the other hand has that extra oomph factor when it comes to being checked in the security. It acts as both a potential body killer and another body killer on the way out. And in dire needs can be the extra body you need to end the game. The only changes I have right now is potentially switching one of the BT5 Greymons for a BT1 Greymon. Both give a plus 2000 DP, but the BT1 Greymon is an on-play cost of 4 versus 5. And with breaking a possibility, with Marcus out I can choke my opponent to 1 memory. For level 5s, it's a simple 4 BT5 Metal Greymon Alteros mode and 4 EX1 Metal Greymon. With BT5 Metal Greymon Alteros mode, this lets you delete a Digimon with 4000 DP or less from the battlefield if it's evoed on top of a Metal Greymon for a memory cost of 1. The fact that you can hit Gabumons, Agumons, Vmons, and Sistermon Blancs can be a huge game changer. And with EX1 Metal Greymon, War Greymon can finally obtain piercing. But do keep in mind that your Omnimon does not get this effect. For level 6s, this is where the deck feels a little Jesmon-y, because of the low mega level Digimon count with 4 BT1 War Greymon and 1 BT4 Shine Greymon as the heavy hitters. BT1 War Greymon is my a delicate plan and my extra security checker when going into the security. With Demimeramon, almost any Agumon, Starter Deck Greymon, EX1 Metal Greymon, and Metal Greymon Alteros mode, you have a 15,000 to 16,000 DP Piercer that negates option cards and gets 2 checks. If you evoed into War Greymon that turn, that's 3 checks. Shine Greymon's not as great, but I wanted something that costs 3 that can give me extra checks, especially with Marcus. Though Shine Greymon may possibly be shifted out of the deck for BT5 War Greymon. Shine Greymon, while a Greymon, is not a Dragonkin Digimon, which affects the piercing capability with Metal Greymon. BT5 War Greymon may ultimately be where I end up, because I can delete a blocker that would prevent Blitz Omni from going in for game. Although EX1 War Greymon does the same thing when I attack. And going back to the OG starter deck, for the extra aggressive nature, starter deck 1 War Greymon may be another option. This leaves the level 7s with 3 Blitz Omnimon, a finisher for the deck if your opponent has no more blockers. But as I mentioned for level 4s, if they swing and pop a Geo Greymon out, that can also be a game ending. For substitutions, you can build the deck into a more mid to late game variant by splashing Omnimon Alter S. Its effect is especially useful against wide building boards like Rookie Rush. Moving into option cards, this deck runs 3 in the form of Lightning Joust. Lightning Joust further promotes War Greymon swings into security by making him bigger and adding extra checks. Because this deck does take time to set up, you're typically at less security than your opponent. Because of this, rarely do you chip away at your opponent's security more than once. Because War Greymon can potentially hit 4 at one time, negating all option cards and piercing over anything regardless if they block, and then Blitz Omnimon for game. And remember, you must have equal to or less security than your opponent to get those extra checks. The last 5 cards in the deck are Tamers in the form of 3 Marcus Damon for memory stabilization and 2 Nokia Shiromine. Marcus puts your memory to 3, which is just one part of the War Greymon combo. And with Nokia, you can further reduce the evolution cost of War Greymon and then still have memory to play option cards or other Digimon. In terms of strengths, this deck is extremely aggressive, and at times can even make Metal Greymon Altaros mode a piercer with 10 to 12,000 DP. Blockers tend to not be as big of a threat, because you can pierce through them to get into security. In terms of weakness, the deck space is very tight, and because of the low top end makes it feel like Jessamon with occasional bricking. Because Koromon is in this deck, this allows you to draw into pieces you may need. But I've honestly had the most trouble finding rookies, funnily enough, over anything else. Other aggro decks can potentially out-aggro this deck due to the lack of blockers and defensive option cards. But in general, I'd say the deck has good matchup against security control and mid to late game decks. For the aggro mirror, it's a coin toss. Because of this, it may be advised to stay in the raise like Jessamon where needed, and push for lethal in a single turn. As for combos, the deck is very linear, raising up one Digimon at a time and finding your pieces. If needed, you may push your Greymons out to swing into security depending on what your matchup is and drawing to dig deeper for pieces. Your win condition is typically getting your Marcus and Nokia out to stabilize to 3 memory. Nokia reduces the cost by 1 for your War Greymon, for a memory cost of 2. Lightning Joust to give yourself a 3rd or potential 4th check with starter deck Greymon, and after swinging, your opponent's only out is Chikurimon, which can re-enable option cards in later checks. But if you make it through, just Digivolve in a Blitz Omnimon, which restands your Digimon and Blitz for the game. Tribal Greymon is a really fun deck. It's not tier 0 or anything crazy like that, but it's a fun deck that I've always loved, because again, my favorite Digimon is War Greymon. But in BT8 and BT9, you bet I'll be back with another Tribal Greymon deck that features the dark counterpart, Black War Greymon. What are your thoughts on Greymon Tribal for this set? And what would you change if you had any? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, do hit that subscribe button and the notification bell for future content. This is DIGI-PANDA. Logging out.